Shouts out to Noah Boa, Bottom Notch, Ken Son. This I originally did this verse for them. I'm gonna spit it right now. Comments in the background. Here we go. Malik WHAAAT, Diamond. I've been kicking rhymes since the way back. Rolling with the Filipino bro in 5.0. Black top, spitting the vision. Yo, the rhyme in my bones. DNA grow flows like it grow my brain cells. Blade stays sharp like a needle in Bane's tail. A tail tall, short, or even in between. Rap blathermouth, even speaking my dreams. Too many people faking on a Babylon mob. The sun turn them to shadows like an atomic bomb. Blow them out. Droid rappers take a seat. The goddess on the mic might turn you to a peach. You need it. It tastes sweet. The blood of my enemies, not as sweet as the sweat on a sweetie face. Genie from the bottle, you can rub it and he coming out. Breathe heat, mist like fog rolling over the bay. Where I stay, I can see it from the beach or the mountain peaks. Stay high, see by wide angle how we hang upside down. From the tree, son, monkey king, 齐天大圣.
Hey, what up, though? Thank you for tuning in to the Dope Friendz Podcast. This is Leon. This is the podcast where I link up with dope friends that do dope things for the world. And, you know, today we're live. We're not, I mean, this is live, but the podcast is not live. But today we're reporting live from Oakland, California, to where I could chop it up with a really dope friend. This is a friend he's a man that does a lot of dope things, right? Like, this is an MC. He's a cartoonist, right? A spiritual person, you know what I mean? Just an activist, I would say, right? You know what I mean? This is just a dude that does so many things, man. His name is Malik
Diamond.
How you doing today, man?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
All right. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, I suck at introductions. So maybe, like, is there something that you could, introduce yourself to the world? Like, how would you tell people, like, your business card, so to speak, man?
Interesting question. I'm gonna answer that by just saying that I'm Malik WHAAAT, Diamond, aka the 7-letter stone, like it's 7 colors in a rainbow and 7 notes of musical town. I'm into a lot of stuff, man. I do a lot of stuff. Not to get too deep right away, but I'm just going to go ahead and jump into it. Like, I feel like life is to be lived. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we live in a world where folks are essentially, corralled into this sort of like machine way of being, and people's like aspirations and lives typically are very mediocre and unimaginative. And I've just never been that kind of a person. It's like, whether it's by nature, by personality, whatever, I'm really like we only have so much time that we're here, and I want to use that time. I want to have that time in the best way that I possibly can. So I do a lot of stuff.
And you work for yourself now, right?
I work for myself now. Yes, that is correct. I am a hip-hop educator. That is what it says on my business card. And I've done a lot of work, mainly in San Francisco Unified, doing workshops there with the youth, primarily working with kids who are like junior high school age, teaching about the history and culture of hip-hop, and doing graffiti art workshops, DJing workshops, rapping, lightweight breaking, although like I'm a little too old and crippled to do all that fancy stuff.
You're also a martial artist though, so I don't know if you can't do it, but you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and even when it comes to martial arts, like, that's I have a handful of what I consider to be my deep passions in life, and Kung Fu is one of them. But the days of me putting on pads and like going toe to toe with people are long over. Like I do my Tai Chi now.
Also, you with my aunties in the park in the morning.
Yeah,
doing the calm, meditative Tai Chi.
Not really though, because if I'm, they be out there early, bro.
Yeah.
If I'm up early enough to be out there with the aunties in the park, then it means that I just haven't gone to sleep yet. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, So I do the workshops, teach all that kind of stuff, but also as far as like what I do, you know, I've been rapping and making hip hop albums since 2007 was when I started. So a little over 10 years now. That's something I still do. I've been drawing comics forever. In fact, that was when I was a kid, that was what I wanted to do. From the time I was like 8 or 9 years old and I first really started reading comics and buying comics and everything like that. I started drawing around that time too, because it was just something that was very captivating for me. And I did that for a while. Entering into young adulthood, I, like a lot of people, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was pretty much lost, I would say. And I kind of left that behind. And then eventually, you know, in the mid 2000s, you know, I had this whole vision, and that was kind of what led me into getting involved in hip hop and becoming a rapper or whatever. So, focused very much on that for a long period of time. Then I got into doing hip hop education, which actually, for the most part, I prefer to the world of like performing and the whole hustle of music. That's another conversation we can come back to. But I really like working with kids, and I find it much more fulfilling and satisfying to be like sharing knowledge with people and having those kind of experiences versus just getting everybody to put their hands in the air. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And, you know, in the last couple of years, I decided, you know, because I'm almost 40 years old, so I'm getting there, you know what I'm saying? And I kind of had one of these moments where it's
you don't look it, man.
Yeah, well, thank you.
People of color just don't age. I
yeah,
feel like.
No, it's good genes, man. My dad is 83, and he looks like he's 20, 30 years younger, you know what I mean?
Oh, dang.
But anyway, it was one of those kind of things where it's like, you know, I'm watching that sand fall into the bottom part of the glass, and I'm like, you know, this comics thing is something I have a deep love for. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And there were a number of things that had held me back for doing it for a long time, and I just set those things aside. I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to do this. So
now, was it hard for you to transition to a point where you can work for yourself? Like, how was that journey?
There were definitely challenges. I would say a lot of those challenges were internal. And I'll come back to that in a second. But I was very much like positioned in a good way to do that because of my experience working in a nonprofit industrial complex. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Without getting into too many details of that, because it's an ugly story. Suffice to say that while I was doing that, I was doing it in a capacity where I was largely independent. So I was working from home, and I was essentially running the whole education component of this org myself. So I was making all the connections. I was building all the curriculums, doing all of the classes, just doing like that. And I didn't have somebody day to day looking over my shoulder. You know what I mean? Like I decided early on I wasn't going to go into the office and do this work. And there's a number of reasons for that, but that's besides the point. So I was like, no, I'm going to work from home because I work better that way. And so through that experience, I got the understanding of what it means to work on one's own and to be in control of one's time. So once it got to the point where it's like, okay, I'm striking out on my own now, that eased the transition significantly. But as far as like the internal struggles of it, one of the most difficult things in that sense is we live in a culture that's very productivity and efficiency oriented, right? Like we're supposed to be machines. You got to be doing something all the time or else you're not doing it right. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of shame and guilt that's attached to that with,
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like whether or not you're doing enough or you're hustling hard enough or whatever, you know, this kind of nonsense.
Especially in the nonprofit, and I would argue not just nonprofit, but in the education world, it's kind of like there's this expectation that you should be extra productive because the things that you're doing are extra important, which is true, but you're not getting extra paid for all the extra work
that is
you're
for sure.
doing. You know what I mean? But it's just kind of like this expectation. That's why they call this like gendered labor, right? Because it's like this idea that you should do it because you love it, and that love is enough for you to enough of a payment, right?
Which is just honestly, as far as my experience and what I've seen and heard from other folks, is just another tagline to further exploit people.
Hell yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, well, if you're doing it for the cause, then you should do it to the utmost and forget about your health and well-being and your family and your relationships and whatever else. You're supposed to just climb on the cross and be a martyr for this bullshit.
Right.
Like, nah, man.
But I mean, I guess like, cause that kind of speaks to, I think what you mean when you say that, like the nonprofit industrial complex, right? Cause I think like some folks might not be like familiar with that concept, right?
Right.
But an industrial complex just basically means it's a business, right? So it makes it really interesting when you work for like something that's supposedly about social justice, but really at the bottom line, it's like, well, how is it going to sustain itself, right? It's just through money.
Well, and this is the thing. So a lot of these things that happen are just a result of the particular type of economic system that we have. Like, for example, I was breaking this down for somebody the other day. So when you have a nonprofit, even if it's like the one I was working for, which was very much a ragtag outfit, you know what I mean? It was very small, whatever. It still comes down to like, okay, when I left, there were, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members of the administrative staff, right? Mm-hmm. So there's an administrative staff member for every like 2 or 3 employees, pretty much. But here's the thing. Without those staff members, the work that needed to get done in order to continue the business of the org wouldn't have gotten done. So just from a structural standpoint, those positions are necessary, but it's like, it's top heavy and it's draining more resources. So to have a structure like a nonprofit, because of the system that we have, inherently there's certain structural things that have to happen in order for that to even continue. It's just like any other kind of business where, it's a top-down model, right? So you have people at the top have more authority, are getting paid more. People at the bottom, it's a pyramid model, and a pyramid model is fundamentally exploitative. You know what I mean? There's no way around that. There's no creative solution to that. If I say jump and your job is to say how high, you say how high, or else your phone bill's not getting paid.
Right. So I mean that still kind of brings me back to the question of, because this is something I want to do, working for yourself, right? So how do we get there? Are there like best practices or like some advice that you can offer up? Or
so the first thing I'm going to say is that, like any other kind of endeavor, especially when it comes to anything related to art and creativity, luck is a primary factor. Like, are you in the right place at the right time? And there's a psychological, and I would say even spiritual component to this, because there are people who believe that they have bad luck, and people who believe that they have good luck, and people who believe that they have good luck tend to have good luck. So I'm just going to say that and leave that. But as far as like on the practical tip, in terms of like building business, whatever, there's very little that I could say about that. Just because of the way that it's happened for me. Like, pretty much I worked doing education for the nonprofit. I made a certain amount of connections doing that, so that when I went out on my own, I had a network of people that I could then reach out to and be able to facilitate the business. In terms of practical skills, things like effectively managing your time. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like having some kind of a schedule. I'm a big believer in to-do lists, right? Like, I'll sit down and I have a paper calendar. I mean, I'm not on the smartphone. Yeah. I don't use a smartphone. I'm not on the super digital techno, whatever. I have a paper calendar, and I'll look at that 2 or 3 months ahead of time, and I'll start looking at, okay, what needs to be done by this time? What needs to be done by this time? And I'll write it into my calendar. One of the things that I find is that I'm better at remembering stuff when I've actually physically written it down. So there's that, keeping on top of that, making a to-do list for things that need to be done, setting deadlines. This is a crucial aspect, because one of the things about being your own boss is it's real easy to give yourself a day off. You know what I mean?
I deserve this.
Like, yeah, no, or I need this.
Probably do.
Which is real, you know what I'm saying? Like, getting back to the productivity efficiency thing, people act like we're supposed to be machines. You got to understand, for the vast majority of time that human beings have been on this planet, we're talking 3 million years for the human species, 300,000 years, give or take a few millennium, for modern humans. We spent most of that time doing not a whole lot at all. There's a anthropologist by the name of Marshall Solins who came out with a book back in like the 60s that just blew everybody's mind with the stuff that he revealed, because there's very much a idea in this culture that being a so-called primitive human being was a life of miserable, horrific drudgery in which you could be eaten by a fucking saber-toothed tiger or whatever the shit people have in their heads, right? What Marshall Solins discovered through his studies of the Bushmen in Africa and also Aborigines who were still living as hunter-gatherers is that these people did pretty much the entirety of the necessary work to survive. By that I mean getting food, making whatever tools they need to make, making whatever clothes they need to make, etc., etc. That they worked an average of 2 to 3 hours a day. The rest of the time, they spent, like every other living creature, not doing much at all. Frequent naps is a quote from that book.
I think Angela Davis is something like that, right? Like her ideal work day, or like the ideal model for the work day would be about 2 hours or something like that. Right. I mean, y'all can fact check me, but I think that's something that she said.
And and that's how it was. Like the rest of the time, you're either napping, singing, dancing, hanging out with the homies, having sex, doing rituals, like basically just being a living being. So, the whole idea of giving oneself a day off, like I deserve this, like that's not a spoiling oneself thing. It's a being a human being thing, Mm-hmm. But at the same time, of course, there's a certain amount of work that needs to get done in order to make sure the bills get paid. So right. Therein comes all the skills like, I hate this phrase time management, like as if time was something to manage. Like, what are you talking about? Like, time is a construct. A clock is a construct, right? That's a whole rabbit hole. But anyway, like setting priorities, setting deadlines, making sure that things get done in a timely fashion that need to get done, being on point with that kind of stuff. These are all skills that are important in any kind of business venture, regardless of what you're doing,
So is your independent hustle primarily the hip-hop education, or is it like also your cartooning work, your music, right? Or other things that venture into that, or is it just primarily the education work?
Right. I would say on a big level that everything feeds everything else, you know what I mean? But on a just naked, stark, like rip the plastic cover off and look at the copper wire underneath, like how my bills are paid, that's being a hip-hop educator. I also work part-time at an event venue, but that's something I do more for shits and giggles than anything else, and also to get me out of the house, because as you might imagine, I spend a lot of time at home, and being in a state of what I call functional poverty means that I'm not necessarily running around spending a lot of money doing X, Y, or Z. So having an opportunity and an excuse to get out of the house and interact with other people, especially people who are like not necessarily folks who are within my inner circle, you know what I mean? Just like regular people,
Right.
Just continuing to have that kind of presence and those kind of relationships, because those are important. Like, if the idea of community means anything, at the bare minimum, it means being able to and having the opportunity to interact with people who are different from you and are leading different kind of lives, right? So
what do you think it means to be a hip-hop educator? Because I mean, I know this is like a big thing, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, Oakland. There are a lot of hip hop educators, right? Right. Like, what is it, and like, why is there such like a need, or like, you know what I mean, or at least a want or desire for hip hop education? What do you think?
So I can definitely talk about what it means for me. But before
that's the only thing I want you to talk about.
Right. Well, hold on, no, because I got some other shit I want to say on that note too. Is the machine, and I'm just going to say it like that, has a constant need and hunger for the new, the living, and the authentic, and the living and the authentic are very much the same thing. It needs those things as fuel in order to continue. What pop culture needs more than anything else is whatever your uniqueness may be. It needs your life experience. Just look at this. Now that's a kind of a big, what is he talking about? So let's bring it down. So you have a YouTube channel and you do things in your real life, but you videotape them and you put them on YouTube. You become super popular. You get a bunch of hits on YouTube. YouTube is making money. It couldn't make money without the data and the information that you were feeding it. It wouldn't be what it is. So it needs you to feed it with your experiences in order for it to perpetuate itself. Right? Now, hip hop, as has now become clear from the standpoint of 2018, has been like a huge burst of energy for the machine. It has fed it all kinds of energy, right? Like hip hop, rap music is the most popular music in the world. I remember reading somewhere last year that the majority of business of pressing up CDs is done by people who rap, right? So it's just, and those are just two off the cuff examples of that give an idea of the scope of the enormity of economic activity and energy that the machine is getting from hip hop. And hip hop has very much been, like everything else, co-opted and incorporated into that machine. So of course, when it comes to the education level, we're now dealing with, the people who were. So, like I said, I'm almost 40 years old. I was born in 1980. Hip-hop started officially in 1973. So, the oldest members of hip-hop culture would be now in their 50s and some in their 60s, right? So, we're now 1 or 2 or 3 even generations down the line of hip-hop having been a part of not only culture in the United States, but globally, right? Like, it's just a part of reality now. So, of course, it's going to enter into the educational institution, that being an institution and being a part of the machine, if for no other reason than you have people who grew up as a part of that culture and are bringing some semblance of those values, but most definitely the aesthetic into those environments. Because I would argue that the true values cannot be manifest in the institution. That's another conversation.
Let's have that conversation. What are the true values then? Okay,
so that's a question that's now going to lead me back into what does being a hip hop educator mean for me personally, and what does hip hop mean for me personally. So KRS-One, who I love, as one should, he once said that hip is the knowledge, hop is the movement, right? That's deep. Now, through my part of my journey through hip hop culture has also been part of my journey through being a human being and through understanding myself in the various aspects of my ancestral identity, right? Like, hip hop is a black thing. It is something that comes from African traditions, right? Now, I'm also part Native. So I did a lot of studying on the tip of both Black American history, but also indigenous history. But on the Native tip, that's also something that I'm involved with as far as, like, I participate in that. It's not just something that exists in books for me. Like, I go to ceremonies, like, do all this kind of stuff, whatever, and have for quite a while now. So my understanding of that and what that meant helped me to understand the culture and the lives and the world of my African ancestors as well, and the ways in which those the energies and things that those traditions have in common, number one, and number two, the way in which those things manifest within hip hop, right? So
And don't forget, you're also basically a Chinese martial artist.
Right. Yeah, I got all the colors on the medicine wheel, bro. Like red, black, yellow, white. I got adopted into Chineseness.
Hey, but you know, it's funny. Like, on just a quick side note, I learned about Taoism largely through the RZA.
Right.
You know what I mean? So.
Right, you know? And so, just quick on the Wu-Tang tip for a minute. So, one of the reasons why... So, Wu-Tang didn't hit me till 2004. Like, the Wu-Tang had been out for a while, but I'm born and raised in the Bay. I was like a West Coast dude as far as music goes. So, I didn't get into Wu-Tang till like 04. So, but I started studying Japanese and Chinese martial arts and Asian philosophy generally when I was like 11 or 12 years old. So we're talking 91, 92. So I already kind of had a background in that stuff. And then encountering Wu-Tang just was like, oh shit, it just multiplied it. You know what I mean? Brought all these things together. So to get back into the, you know, so what does hip hop mean for me then? And it comes down to, and this is my basic breakdown that I give to people, that I break down in my workshops and whatever, is there's really only two kinds of cultures. There's hierarchical cultures and there's non-hierarchical cultures. There's the pyramid and the circle. That's it. Everything else is a variation of that, essentially.
It's the rock and it's the cipher.
Right. Well, and the rock is deep. So a diamond, I'm just going to throw this out. A diamond shape is one pyramid with another beneath it. In other words, it's a balance. So you have the yin and the yang. So if you have the yin and the yang, that's a circle.
Well, that's deep.
Right?
I don't think that's what Jay-Z was going for, though.
Yeah, no, not at all. But that's what I'm going for.
Yeah,
the four corners and the four sides.
That's beautiful, man.
But yeah, so hip-hop manifest, and whatever culture is based on is going to manifest, right? So, if I walked out of the portal from the fifth dimension, which I've been known to do, and I go out on the porch of my house and I look around, I'm going to see a whole lot of concrete, right? So what do I automatically know about the culture of this alien reality I'm now visiting if I don't know anything else? I know that concrete is real important to them because it's everywhere, right? In other words, values are manifest. So if you break hip-hop culture down, when MCs get together and rhyme, when breakers get together and break, how do they do that? They do that in a circle. And in hip-hop language, they call that a cipher, right?
Or donut, you know, Jay Dilla.
Right. And those donuts, Detroit.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Jay Dilla. But yeah, so hip-hop fundamentally as something that is descended from the oldest human communities on the planet manifests those circle values. But also was born into a world that's based on the pyramid. So in a way, it's both at the same time. And to me, gives me a way as a black person, as a native person, as somebody also of European ancestry, a way to navigate and understand the world in which I live, in both the physical and in the spiritual aspects. So hip-hop for me is a lot. Now when it comes to being a hip-hop educator, well, that depends on what we mean by the word educator. Do we mean the school system? Do we mean having conversations on the porch while we drink wine?
I mean, what is it that you do?
Right. For money, I go into schools.
Yeah.
And they pay me. They write me checks, and they always cash.
They better, shoot.
You know what I'm saying, right? You know, and it's an institution, but, you know, one of the things they say is, like, you got to meet the people where they are. And in the case of children, literally where they are is the school system, you know? So if you want...
You're in public schools, right?
Yeah.
Like mostly public schools.
Mostly public schools. I work with a number of charter schools as well, which are also public schools, technically. I've worked with a couple of private schools, you know, but primarily, yeah, with public schools. And once again, primarily working in San Francisco, I mostly work, and just through the particular program that I was under the auspices of within San Francisco Unified. They have like a mentoring program. So I primarily worked with Latino, Black students, some Asian, some white, but mainly students of color. And like I said, so like age 11 to 17, 18.
But I would imagine, even though it sounds to me that it's clear that you have a really specific kind of trajectory based on your understanding of hip hop, no matter where you're at, I would imagine that the methods would have to change drastically based on the school that you're at and the demographics and the type of school, right?
I mean, yes and no. Yes for certain things, no for others.
Okay.
The essence of whatever it is that I'm coming there to teach is there regardless. You know what I mean? Like, here's the elements. What does that mean? Here's the pyramid. Here's the circle. Like, here's these invisible things about the environment that you're in that you've never thought to question, but they're a key to understanding the entire world that you live in. So certain things are the same. How I talk to different groups of kids is something that's different. And how I talk to any given kid within an institution is fundamentally different in some ways from how I would talk to them outside that institution.
Right. Because how you going to be talking to these parents, though? You know what I mean? Exactly.
And this is the thing. Like, being a part of an institution means sending your kids basically into the care of strangers. So even more so than a regular teacher, that's what I am when I come into a classroom, is a stranger. Like, I don't live in your neighborhood. I don't know your family. I never met your cousins. We don't hang out together. We don't see each other at the market. Like, I've never seen you before now, and probably when I'm done, I'm never going to see you again. So there's a fundamental aspect of human relationship that is not present because we are within an institution, which changes the nature of our interaction inherently.
Now, are you doing, is it an after school program or is it during school?
During school. I don't like after school programs.
Don't?
No, after school.
Why is that?
Oh, Jesus, bro. Like, first of all, you have a body of people who you have already essentially locked up for 6 hours in a day to be in this institution. And that's what it is. Let's not have any illusions about what compulsory schooling is. Compulsory schooling is you send your kids to this institution or else. Right? And like everything else having to do with the law, the threat and application of violence is behind that, right? You don't send your kids to school, they're coming for you, right? Men with guns will come and take your family away if you don't go to school, right? So let's talk about
that literally was my high school experience, because I cut school so much that police were picking me up to bring me to school. Every day I burden high school. So I mean that's not even like a metaphor or like a joke or to be taken light of.
No, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's literal.
You know, so when it comes to dealing with after school programs, it's like, number one, you're dealing with a body of folks who just spent 6 hours being at a place they'd rather not be, and now you're under the auspices of whatever their program is, and different programs work in different kind of ways. But being institutional and also non-compulsory, it's really like, it's like being in a free-for-all, bro. Like, I've worked some after-school programs. Let me tell you something about young people in 2018. There's very little they would rather do other than punch buttons on their smartphone, right? Or play video games. What they want to do is plug into the machine. So when they are no longer in an environment where they are required to behave in a certain way as part of the compulsion of being there, aka a regular class period, the second they're outside of that, they're in the machine. The end. Attempting to engaging kids that have been so thoroughly conditioned to exist in that way is incredibly difficult, and in my experience, mostly disappointing.
And that's also my theory, like it plays into my theory for why more kids are into making beats now versus they were like during my time, a lot more kids were into rapping, right, or MCing, because like, you know, you're literally in front of another machine or you can make beats on your phone now, you know?
Right. In fact, I met a dude one time, I'm blanking on his name, but this was a few years back. This was like 2013, 2014. He had an entire studio that he had put together with about $60 or $80 worth of apps on his iPad. Mm-hmm. And this dude was an OG, like he's 10 years older than me. So he's a longtime DJ, producer, all this type of stuff. So the shit that he was making was phenomenal.
So the shit that some of these kids be making, like that I've worked with out here in Frisco, is fire off a freaking iPad. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, hey, let me get on that. You know what I mean?
For real. And that's, you know, just like you were saying, that's something that basically you can sit in a room by yourself under the dead glow of machine light and do.
They do it in class a lot of, I think. They just put their headphones in.
Do it in class, you know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't, and that's the culture in which we live in 2018. Machine culture is the autonomous unit, aka the human, plugged into a machine by themselves, interacting with the machine.
Right.
Like,
thank you for watching through this machine, by the way, and listening. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, the beats thing. So that's my whole thing with after school programs. And the thing is, when you're dealing with a class period, or if you're dealing even with, like I was doing the mentoring program, which is a little bit looser than a regular class. Mm-hmm. Like, everybody already knows the deal. Like, you're already under a certain level psychologically of control. Like, we have to do whatever's happening here. So if I walk into third period English and I'm like, all right, everybody, take your cell phone out, turn that shit off. I don't want to see it again for the next hour. They're going to do it.
But you're going to see a lot of fidget spinners, huh?
You know, those kind of came and went. Okay. I did see a few. But
they're gone already, huh? That was fast.
Yeah, that was super quick. It was like Tickle Me Elmo. But like, whereas in an after school program, if I have a bunch of kids that come in, I'm like, all right, everybody take out your phones and turn them off. They're gonna look at me like, who's this nigga? Like, you know, like, I'm not in school, bitch. Like, whatever. Yeah. You know, and it's that kind of environment. So I very much prefer working during the class period. And that's one of the things I like about working with these mentoring groups is it's during school hours, but it's not a class period per se. Like, they have mentors or counselors who are not teachers. So there's more of a dynamic of relationships and less of a, oh, we're just here because we have to be here and we have to do whatever you say.
I'd imagine you'd have less parents on your back too, right? Because it's during school, so they just kind of assume what happens during school is all mandatory, right? So it's less of like, you're teaching my kid hip hop? No, you got to teach my kid how to code, like how to be a lawyer, how to be a doctor, how to make money. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because that was the experience I had a lot of times working with a lot of kids in Frisco that I thought was really talented, that really wanted to do hip hop, but their parents didn't want them to do it for whatever reason. You know what I mean? But because my experience is much more with the after school programs, right?
Right.
So the parents had a lot more kind of ways of monitoring that versus the during school. I don't know. Would you agree, or what are some of your experiences on that?
Well, and I haven't, you know, because I haven't kind of had the kind of experience that you had, because you really did the utmost with your after school work as far as like at Burton and whatever, the whole Cypher High, and working with families and putting a whole event together. Like, doing something to that extent is something that I don't really have experience with. But I think you're right. And I think, you know, under doing class period type of workshops or doing mentoring class workshops can kind of generally be categorized under enrichment activities. Right? That's what they call it. The sort of side things that you do instead of this other stuff. Mm-hmm. But what it comes down for me is you are, like, what I'm doing when I come in and do these workshops is I am offering these students a key and showing them a door. Mm-hmm. And showing them how to put the key in that door and unlock it, and giving them somewhat of an idea of where that door can take them. Now,
where can that door take them, do you think?
So I can speak on where that door has taken me and people that I know. So, for example, Intellect, who I work with a lot, making beats, DJing, like that's you know, that's my boy. Like he's my nephew. I've been kicking it and with him and mentoring him for quite a while now, pretty much since I moved back to the Bay. So like 09, 2010, you know, and he was only 18 at that time. He's, I think, 26 now. So we've had a lot of one-on-one time where I've been able to just break down various things for him and whatever. So in terms of where that door could lead for somebody like him and for somebody like me, creativity and art is something that gives you an understanding of yourself, an understanding of the world. It gives you a way to talk about your experiences, to express your experiences. It's very much about becoming who you are and enriching your experience as a human being. Now, that's not the same thing as this is a way to make money, right? The fact of the matter is that we live in a culture that does not value art or artists in any way other than being a product, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and you can tell that by the number of broke-ass working artists there are. And any musician will tell you that, any musician who's been doing what they do for a long time will tell you that the last 20, 30 years has been devastating to that, as far as even the possibility of earning a living through that, right? But that's not first and foremost what creativity, imagination, creation, and art are about. Those are about, firstly, you. It begins with you. You're the one doing it. And then how it affects your community, mm-hmm. how it benefits your community. Even if that's just your homies who love your latest mixtape or are gonna work the door at your art show where you display your photography or your paintings or whatever. Like, it's a way, first of all, of understanding yourself and dealing with your own internal state, making that external, and it's a way of bringing people together and adding benefit to the lives of people who are around you. Now, that may or may not come with economic resources,
right.
Which gets back into the kind of what at this point is a hip hop cliche. Like, are you doing this shit for the love or for the money? Like, whatever. Like, niggas are doing bad. Like, we're doing it for every kind of thing we can do it for.
Right.
But first and foremost, what I feel that it's for, what this spiritual energy is for, what these God sciences are for, is it's for the spirit, man, for yourself and for the people around you, for your community, you know.
But I mean, it kind of goes back to kind of like the nonprofit industrial complex, right? For the love, for the money, but the money it's also very important, right? Like the work needs to be recognized.
The money is survival.
Exactly, right? The money is urgent. Like, if you don't have if you're not able to pay the bills, then like, what can your art really translate into, right? So like, is it too much to ask, right? Like, where is the line? How, like, you know what I mean? How can, I know, at least for me personally, hip hop is the only reason I got into college, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was a fuck up, right? Like, I went to continuation high school. I barely graduated with straight D's. You know what I'm saying? I went to city college after that, not having any direction, not knowing like any of the norms of schools or like, you know, the institution of schools, because I cut most of it. You know what I mean? Right. But I knew hip hop, and hip hop was a way for me to understand the world and to be able to theorize the world. And I guess like a level that was respected only once I got into these institutions later on. Mm-hmm. But I can't say that it's translated into a lot of tangible capital, but I could say that it has translated into some, but not always in the way that people might expect, right?
Right. But and regardless of that, what it has translated into is the life that you live every day. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying. Like, this shit is about life. Like, ever since Standing Rock, people have been like, water is life. Like, hip hop is life. You know, like you said, oh, I was a fuck up. I wouldn't have done shit unless exactly. Bingo. There it is. You know, same thing for me. Like, having the experience, well, one of being, let's say, a fan of hip hop music, mm-hmm. like, this gave me something that I cannot put any kind of value or price tag on as a young person growing up. First and foremost, the joy and the love that I've gotten from day one from rap is priceless. Mm-hmm. I remember being whatever. I'm in like elementary school, and that was back when LL Cool J first had that song "I'm Bad" that came out, and I remember hearing that, and like all I wanted to do was listen to that over and over and learn every single lyric, and then I would walk around saying those lyrics like it just brought something to me. You know what I mean? And then getting into the time of being like a young adult, being like early 20s, mid 20s. Trying to figure out what the hell is going on in the world, and what the hell I'm doing in it. It's like, dude, I was a very angry young adult. You know what I mean? I was very angry. I was very depressed. I was very much on the verge of like, am I gonna make it, or am I gonna be another one of these folks that ups the percentage point on the suicide rate? You know what I'm saying? As a friend of mine put it, an itch on the top of your mouth that only the barrel of a shotgun can scratch. You know what I'm saying? So that's the point I was at when rapping came to me as something that I could do, when I had this whole vision. And really that led to a transformation of myself and who I was and what I was doing in every aspect. And that created, I'm not going to say a direct path, but kind of a meandering path, but one that I would not have been on otherwise, to where I'm at today, having gotten involved with hip hop as in the nonprofit context, and now being involved with it as an independent contractor and a small businessman, doing hip hop in an educational format.
Right.
And if anything, to me, that takes the stress off even the idea of trying to get people to buy my music or pay to come to a show or whatever bullshit, like, which has produced a lot of odious things in hip hop culture. We can come back to that.
I feel like that's such an interesting thing, especially within Bay Area hip hop culture. Because in my opinion, and feel free to disagree, but Bay Area hip hop culture has always been more than just music, right? It's always been more of at least from my view, more of a movement. More of a common language, especially because, in the Bay Area, we're in such close proximity with different folks of color, different communities.
Right.
You know what I mean? Of white folks as well. Like, poor white folks can, you live next door to them.
There's no more of those in the Bay, by the way. Just so everyone knows. They got rid of all the poor white folks and all the poor Negroes. Just, it's 2018. Anyway.
Oh, man. But what's interesting, though? I feel like this whole talk on hip-hop education very much parallels the whole talk on, like, ethnic studies, right? The institutionalization of ethnic studies and the critiques of ethnic studies is something like that can't translate into a tangible form of like a job. Like the first thing that like people ask me when I tell them I study ethnic studies is like, oh, what are you gonna do with that?
Yeah, right.
What do you
like as if your degree was some kind of chip that you were waiting to cash in at a casino.
Right. But I mean, there's something very powerful to be said about, learning about oneself and in order to navigate the world, like in a more, I guess, clever or strategic kind of way. But I think the thing about hip hop that's so fascinating is that we're still talking about something that is inherently Black culture, right? So, I mean, what are your thoughts on hip hop as kind of a social justice education for classrooms that, although they may be predominantly Black and Latinx, right? You said they're also like, diverse, right?
Right.
So, like, what do you think that means?
I don't even know if that's a question I feel comfortable answering.
I mean,
just on the level.
So, how was the weather today?
But I'll take it as, let me say it like this: rather than answer the question, I'll take it as a point of departure to talk about some other things.
Okay.
Like, what does it mean to work with young people as a stranger?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to do that within an institutional context? What does it mean to do that as a hip-hop educator? These are all very big questions and things that I think about and talk about mainly for their entertainment value. Because what it comes down to is this. And I'm going to tell you, like one of my elders told me at ceremony, if you're good at something, you have to teach other people how to do it too.
Oh, okay.
And that is basic to the indigenous understanding of the universe. Like, we as individuals are part of a continuum. There's everybody who came before us that led to us being here, and there's everybody who's going to come after us. Mm-hmm. So we have our own value and our own identity as individuals, but we are part of something greater than ourselves in terms of our line of our ancestral and descendant line, right? So I say all that to say that if you got some knowledge, it is your job to share that knowledge.
I say that a lot too. I feel like that's the burden of knowledge, right? It's like now you know some, you got to share it, and the tricky part is you can't impose it, right?
No,
you just gotta share it, right? Because even any bits of knowledge that any one human has, it's still very like marginal compared to like the amount of information and knowledge that's out there.
Right. Well, and for that, I want to distinguish between information and knowledge.
Okay.
So the 5%ers, aka the nation of gods and earths, have saying, they say, do the knowledge, right? And I think that's a very key phrase. There's an infinity of information, right? Just right now in this space that we're in, let's just take this glass that I've been drinking this wine out of, and let's talk information.
I was drinking grape juice.
There's,
okay.
Anyway. It's fermented grape juice. So
Welch's, you know.
Talking in terms of information, there's what kind of grape juice I was drinking, where it was made, where I bought it, how many miles I drove to get to where I bought it, what is this glass made out of, where did it come from, where were those minerals mined, etc., etc., etc. What is the room temperature of it? What is this? What is that? That's information. There's an infinity of information about any given thing. Knowledge is how you condense information into something that's meaningful or useful in some kind of way.
Right. So you're talking about like critical thinking versus trivia.
Yeah, or just just data, like not just trivia, but data. And being in a machine megatech digital culture, data, information, but like nobody knows what to do with it. It's like knowledge is different.
But I mean, it's kind of like trivia in the sense that, all right, who can guess where this glass was made? That's trivia, right? Versus knowledge is
what's the capital of Zaire?
Right. But like, the knowledge is like asking the question, why is that important, right? Or what are the stakes of like that production of that glass in that particular location or what have you?
And what does it mean to my life? At the bare minimum, it means I have a vessel to pour my wine into and drink it so that I can talk on a podcast. Like, this is knowledge, right? What am I getting from that? So whatever you have knowledge on, it's your responsibility to share it. Now, here's the thing about that. Like, it's my job to share the knowledge. It is not my job to use the parlance of our time. It is not my job to be personally invested in whether or not a given person is going to get that knowledge or not. Mm-hmm. My job is to do the best that I can to impart that knowledge. But if I hang my sense of identity and victory in the world on whether or not a given person gets it, I am setting myself up for failure, disappointment, and despair.
Right.
My job is, as a storyteller, to tell the story. You may or may not listen, read, consume, whatever the story. You may or may not get it. That's not my concern. Mm-hmm. My concern is telling the story in the best way that I can. Right. My concern is teaching and sharing the knowledge in the best way that I can. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean for a given student of a given demographic? There's no way for me to say, because once again, we're talking about being a stranger in an institution. Like, I don't know these kids. They don't know me. I don't know their families. They don't know my families. This is the truth of this institutional thing. And that's something that we take for granted now because that's how everything works. But as far as the human experience on this planet, that is an alien phenomenon. For the majority of human history, I'm talking up until the 20th century, the majority of humans on this planet, were most likely in the immediate or relatively immediate proximity of all their immediate family. They mostly stayed in one place for their entire lives. mostly knew the same people, mostly connected with the same people. This is what it means to have an actual community. Community is a word that's been very cheapened by the alienated culture of Megatech Babylon version 2018, right?
Right.
So to be a part of a community and be a part of people around you is a different level of interaction versus when I just go into a classroom with a bunch of kids I've never met. You know, my job is to present that knowledge as best that I can. And the other factor that's going on here, and this is part of why you have to just do it, you never know what kind of positive impact what you're doing can have. You know, just like you never know what kind of negative impact it can have. So that's why you have to do it the best that you know how to do. Who knows what any one of these kids may make out of what I'm bringing to them, right? But because I'm true to the spirit of what I'm doing, I know it's ultimately going to be positive. But I also know that in most cases, I'm never going to know the particularities of how that manifests. Maybe even a given student is not going to know the particularities. You know, he or she could come to a workshop that I do, have their mind completely blown, and that could end up taking them in a direction that otherwise they would not have gone in, but they don't necessarily know that they went in because of what they heard from me.
Right.
You know, it just becomes a part of their life experience and how they make their decisions and how they come to an understanding of what their values are. You know, this is an infinity complex, bro. This is the butterfly wings flapping, making hurricanes on the other side of the world. You can't predict or call these things. You got to just do it. Right.
I mean, on that note, we are at the 55-minute mark. So, I mean, we talked a lot about your hip-hop education. Are there some things that you want to plug? Like, you know, your comics or stuff like that?
Oh, for sure. Like, you know, hip-hop education is cool. But my first love on planet Earth is doing comics. So since we had the camera going, whether or not people see this or not, I have this stack of comics right here. So these are all the comics I put out so far.
Can you tell us what they are?
So it's called the Concrete Shinobi. It is about a ninja bartender and his adventures in the occult underground of Los Angeles, circa 2008. Loosely autobiographical on account of circa 2008, I was a ninja bartender in the occult underground of Los Angeles.
Plus the characters look like you too.
Right. So, you know, this is the comic that I do, the Concrete Shinobi. I'm an independent publisher. I have my own imprint. I do all of this work myself, from drawing to printing to design, to getting it out there, distribution, whatever. I'm currently doing pretty small runs of my comic, so there's no one issue that I've done more than 100 copies of, and I'm just getting into people's hands because that's what's important.
So how can people find them then? They have to find you somehow.
The best way is to get in touch with me directly. Malik Diamond at hotmail.com is my email address. That's the best way to get in touch with me. However, I'm also the only Malik Diamond around. So even if you go to the Google and you type in Malik Diamond, you're going to find either something I've done or like hockey sticks. I don't know. There's some kind of hockey stick.
Hockey sticks?
Yeah, it's the most random shit ever. But if you Google Malik Diamond, so like I'm on Bandcamp. I got my hip-hop albums are on there. A lot of them are available for free download, so you can check that out. malikdiamond.bandcamp.com. I also have my own website, malikdiamond.com, so you can buy comics through that website. But really the best thing is to just hit me up directly, like malikdiamond@hotmail.com. Just give me a holler. And my comics are tight. I really didn't talk about my comics. I kind of wish I had, but we got into a good combo either way. So,
yeah. Are there any like kind of snippets or previews available online or anything like that people can check out?
Not currently, but you know I can always send them that type of stuff. I'm very much a like real world kind of a person. I don't do a lot in the digital realm. Like that's I do a little bit here and there, but basically like.
But that's cool too, because that means if people hit you, they can expect the response versus like a lot of times you DM somebody you might get left on red as much as it can be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. If somebody hits me up, if you got $5, I'll ship you an issue, and you can see how dope it is.
And it's dope, man. Trust me, they are dope comics.
And it just, I want to say this real quick. Like, part of the reason why I enjoy doing that so much is, like every other kind of creative medium, the truth of comics is that it is by far dominated by the stories and voices of white men. Now, one of the beefs that I have with this whole kind of identitarian culture that we live in now is people think it's become our individuality has become like a marketing niche. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, well, this is an alphabet soup LGBTQ PLC, and therefore you want to read. Like, no. That's not what it's about.
And execs are thirsty for those stories right now.
Oh, yeah.
It's trendy. Like, people are trying to buy those stories.
Yup.
Especially those Netflix specials. People are,
yup.
You know what I mean?
And of course, the stories that they buy are completely asinine and mediocre. Like, it's ridiculous. But,
yeah, that's true. They alright. But it's not bad. A lot of them ain't bad, but they alright.
Man, the only reason it even seems not bad is because we're in a culture of such overwhelming mediocrity.
Because the bar is so low.
Yeah, the bar is so low.
But then, you know what I mean? When the bar is so low, I'm just happy to see somebody that looks like me on screen sometimes. You know
exactly,
what I mean?
And that's called having low standards. Now here,
yeah, I'm saying.
Now here,
let me have my low standards, man.
Now that's cool. I mean, no judgment. It is what it is. Now, and so for me, as far as doing this, like, you know, all of that stuff aside, it's important to have for us to tell our own stories in our own ways,
right?
And that's what I'm doing with this. I'm not an identitarian. I'm not trying to sell anybody on the alphabet POC, whatever the hell merits of my comic, but rather on the story itself. And the story itself is a different kind of story than you're going to get other places because I'm telling it from my perspective, you know? And that's why us telling our stories in whatever kind of way we do that is so important, because it's a perspective that nobody else has, you know? Like, I'm 4 issues into this before I realized that not one single white character even appeared in this comic. Is that a conscious decision that I made? Absolutely not. It's simply a result of me telling a story about that's a fictionalized version of the environment that I was living in. So I'm telling the story of my experience in that world, and because of that world being what it is, that's why there's really not any white folks in it.
Right, know? Right.
But it's not on some identitarian shit, like, I'm going to do a comic with no white folks. No, that don't make any sense. I got a whole bunch of white family. Like, at some point, if at any point the story veers into me talking about my family, there's going to be white folks. But you get what I'm saying. Because
it always gets risky like that, right? When the things are marketed because of identity politics or whatever, it always runs the risk of just just tokenized tropes on these stereotypes of these characters. So that's why it's so important to have something that's honest, that's just representative of one's perspectives, right? Or like lived experiences, right?
You know, when I was in high school, it was, are you a rocker or a rapper? What box do you fit into?
But now it's like, are you a battle rapper? Are you a conscious rapper? Are you a trapper? Are you
what kind of rap do you do? What kind of like, what's your Pokedex entry? Like, man, get out of here.
Yeah. I'm a Charizard though. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I like Charizards.
But yes, buy my comics. Holler at me. Search Malik Diamond. Malik Diamond at Hotmail.
Thank y'all for listening. This is a dope friend, man. Thank you so much for being on here.
Yay!
Hey, buy his comics. Book him for your education workshops and all that stuff, man. Thank y'all. Peace.
Peace.